nice to be here. I feel very comfortable in the company of systems engineers, even though I come from operations research, which is a little different. I'd like to explain to you with an apocryphal story why I'm so comfortable with an audience like you. And I have to work a lot with physicists. We do things in space and underwater, and involves acoustics and radiation and so forth. And I deal a lot with mathematicians. And there's a key difference between these groups of people that I'd like to explain by apocryphal story. I live near Silicon Valley, and of course all the premier employers there like to interview with IQ tests. So this one story begins with a physicist, a systems engineer, and a mathematician waiting to be interviewed. They're called in, the physicist first, and they're asked the following question. I have before me a field full of grazing sheep. I have a big bale of fencing. So how would I go about fencing the sheep on the inside using the minimum amount of fencing material? Well, the physicist thinks this over for a minute or two and brightens up in response. What you should do is take the fencing and surround the sheep and make a circle and draw that circle in as small as possible. That'll give you the minimum material to use to fence the sheep on the inside. The interviewers are very impressed, but decided to go ahead and interview the other two candidates. So they next called in the systems engineer. The systems engineer was given the same problem. How do you take the amount of material to surround these sheep, put them all on the inside? He thought for a minute and said, well, I'd start by putting a circle of fencing around the sheep. The interviewers, of course, raised their eyebrows. They'd heard this before. But then he said, I'd draw the fencing tighter and tighter and tighter until it just contained the extreme sheep and formed a convex hull of fencing around the sheep. Oh, the interviewers are very impressed with that. But nonetheless, they decided to call the mathematician in to give him a chance. So they called in the mathematician, presented the same problem. Here's the sheep and the fencing, and you have to fence them all on the inside. What do you do? The mathematician thought for a minute and said, put the fencing around me and define me as the outside. Now, there's a takeaway from this that I learned with experience, and that is that physicists believe that the universe is an approximation of their equations. Systems engineers believe that their equations are an approximation of the universe. Mathematicians don't care. So I'm here this morning to talk to you about policy, but I come from the Navy, and if demographics are a guide, about 1 in 100 of you have had any experience at all with the military, for which I thank you, by the way, for your service. I thought I should begin by explaining a bit about what's odd about what we do in systems engineering and OR in the Navy and the Department of Defense, because it represents such a large amount of money, such a small fraction of people in the audience. DoD is arguably one of the largest technologically complex organizations in the free world. We spend an enormous fraction of our nation's treasure every year. We hope we spend it well. We're engaged worldwide doing things that we think are important to keep us free. The immediate consequences of all this modeling and analysis you do is pretty rare, don't you agree? I mean, look at the success rate among the papers that you write, among all the projects you get involved in. It's quite rare that something really takes hold and has legs. Intermediate term consequence, also rare, but papers that last long enough and projects that last long enough to be funded more than once sometimes succeed more often. Significant policy change, though, is a real career changer. It's just hard to achieve. It's very difficult. And I believe there's a science behind this, how to conduct the analysis and how to present yourself, that leads to success and policy triumphs. So if you track the consequence of a lot of your research, you find the following. It's your fault. Simple enough. Our scholarly training doesn't prepare us for influence of policy. It just doesn't prepare us. I recently was in a discussion about a Pareto optimal strategy, and I just winced because I knew that the policy type, although a well-educated Yalie, probably thought Pareto was an exotic tropical bird. Okay, problem analysis types. I'm completely agnostic about what techniques you use. I don't care if it's simulation, stochastics, optimization, this stuff all works the same. I don't care if it's a prescriptive model, which is my favorite area, a descriptive model, or a normative model. I just don't care. The goal of all of this has got to be influencing policy.
Yeah, my name is Rakesh Nagi. I'm from the University of Illinois, and I want to begin by thanking you for very insightful and very wise remarks that you made in your talk. I hope the students will pay attention because there's a lot of wisdom in it. So now my question is about the legal part and what is implementable. Oftentimes I've found that when you've solved a problem, then somebody forgot to tell you, I guess you forgot to ask or understand the problem fully. So how do you recover from that? Because as a part of understanding the problem, you didn't fully understand it, and you came up with a solution that then the adopter is going to say this is not going to work for reason A, B, and C. So how do we recover from this? And it should not be perceived as a limitation of the systems in industrial engineering.
Thank you for that. It shouldn't be a limitation, but it's a constant concern. This goes all the way back to qualifying the problem, determining why it's important. Let me take you back to Iraq with me. What we had to determine early on was we couldn't just schedule optimally. We had to schedule in such a way that we could get a diplomatic clearance because we're flying over allied countries. So there's a room not smaller than this where all the scheduling takes place. There's a whole raft of phones that these people use to call foreign governments and say, hey, we're going to be flying stuff over your country tonight at 3 o'clock in the morning. Is this okay with you? So we had to know that ahead of time and actually add some considerations in our scheduling model for those cases in which perhaps we'd have someone who was not comfortable with this. I'm not involved in this now, but I'm sure this is really important in the crowded skies over Syria. Deconflicting, it's the same group of people that are deconflicting our operations with those of the Russians. Not so much the Syrians, but just arranging so you don't trade paint at Mach 2 is not easy. Thank you for that question.